Hi there, Psychonauts. So today I have a trip report for you, and I've decided to stand up. I felt that I needed some space, and I have a lot of energy, so yeah, I don't know. I thought I'd do something different. But I have a trip report for you. I actually had an LSD session over the weekend, and it was a really good one, okay? And I have a lot of insights and ideas to share and discuss, and I hope you'll stick around and listen. So yeah, here we are. Let's just start at the beginning for the trip report. So the dose, I don't really like to get hung up on the doses. Let's just call it a moderate to high dose, okay? We'll just call it that. If you have questions about it, maybe I'll answer. But I didn't dose till after 10:30 at night, so this was a night trip. It was a very quiet, peaceful, contemplative type of trip. Kind of like the introverted psychonauts trip, So the beginning of the trip wasn't very eventful. I just kind of went about as usual until 11 something when I started to feel the effects. And then I laid down in my bed, I listened to some music, but the music wasn't really, I don't know, I couldn't find anything that I was getting into. I kind of just laid there, meditating, thinking, and then at some point, I got the urge to get up. You know that point where you really start feeling those energies? This is the point in the LSD experience that for the inexperienced user, this is like the point where you start to think, oh, am I dying? Am I dying? So I started to get those kind of feelings, but being an experienced psychonaut, I kind of just knew, I just need to get up. I need to get up and move around. And so I did. So when I got out of my bed, went into the living room, it's dark. I don't turn on any lights. This entire trip is spent in darkness, silence, not total darkness and total silence because there's still sources of light and sound, but I didn't turn anything on. Anyway, so it was like 1 something when I get out to the living room. And I hope you're staying with me right now because I haven't even gotten to the good part yet, okay? Okay, so it's around 1 a.m. in the morning. And so I'm in my living room. This is the setting of the trip. It's me in my living room. I do a lot of instinctual movement. That's what I do a lot during trips, is I move my body in a way that's instinctive. I don't know, like the trip gets me to move. So I was doing a lot of dancing and stretching, and I'm with my cat out there in the middle of the night, and he obviously thinks that I'm a total weirdo, and he starts acting very weird. You guys have that too, right? When you trip with your pets and they start tripping with you. So we were having that. It's true. Okay, so let's get into the meat and potatoes of this trip because I have a lot to tell you. I wrote down a lot. It's true. You know what? Let me tell you something kind of funny first. So this was a little humorous part of my trip. And I had been having this little hyperfixation recently with the show I Love Lucy. I'm sure most of you have heard of it at least. And there's this particular skit that I was really enthralled with, and it's called Vitamin Vegemin. And in it, Lucy is doing some sort of commercial for this product, and it's basically a scam product, but it's supposed to be some sort of health product, but really it contains alcohol. So she does this commercial, and as she does more and more takes, which include tasting the product, she gets progressively drunker. And that's the humor of it. That's the humor of it. But I was kind of getting a kick out of something because, as you know, Lucy is a name that is sometimes used to refer to LSD. But at the time that I Love Lucy was going, it started in like 1951. Stay with me. LSD had already been synthesized because it was first synthesized in 1938. Its psychedelic properties were first discovered in 1943. Albert Hofmann, Bicycle Day. We know this, okay? So Lucy hadn't even been a name for LSD yet, not until the Beatles, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. which is apparently not even about LSD, but it is about LSD because people have decided it's about LSD. Okay, have you stayed with me? Because here we go. So I start performing the Vamin Skit on LSD, and it goes something like, are you tired, worn out, listless? Do you poop out at parties? Are you unpopular? Well, the answer to all your problems is in this little bottle. So I would be doing this, especially the lines, do you poop out at parties? Are you unpopular? I got a kick out of it. I don't know if you'll get a kick out of it. I don't know if you can actually appreciate. I don't know. It's like this, like, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of levels to this humor, okay? And I don't know if it's translating. I have a fear that all of this is being lost in translation, but just picture it for a second. Just picture me out in my living room in the middle of an LSD trip, and I'm performing some commercial from a 1950s TV show. And yeah, I mean, LSD probably really is the solution to pooping out at parties, because I couldn't poop out my party if I tried. So throughout the trip, I kind of was like in this little thought loop of, do you poop out at parties? I don't know. It's really silly, but I had to share it with you because I love Lucy. It is true. I love Lucy. I actually do like Lucille Ball. I was thinking about her. I think she's so beautiful. Anyway, I do think about those things on LSD. I find a lot of things very beautiful. Even people, of course. People are beautiful. Anyway. So, here we go, okay? I want to talk to you about something else, and it is hyperphantasia. Have you ever heard of hyperphantasia? Because I think I have it. It is extremely vivid mental imagery, and it's the opposite of aphantasia, which is the lack of mental imagery. And I bring this up because it seems to have, I seem to have, okay, not only do I have hyperphantasia, I think I have like an audio version of hyperphantasia, so extremely vivid mental audio. I also have like extremely distinct internal thinking and internal monologues. So like all of my mental processes seem to be very vivid and distinct. I'm very much a mind person. I think that's why I like LSD so much, because I can really like get into my mind and like break everything down, and it's a great place. You know, this trip overall was very refreshing. You know, I often find trips, especially with LSD, they offer a lot of mental clarity, kind of give you a reset. I also tend to find a lot of creative inspiration and spiritual alignment. Yeah, so there's a lot of benefits that I experienced with this trip. But let's get back on track. I hope you don't mind my antics. It's just the way things are, okay? It's the way things are. But hyperphantasia, extremely vivid mental imagery. So something that I was having during this trip is, at one point, I was getting into this like peak state of consciousness, and you know where you get to that point where it's almost like you're God. And I every time I say that, it's just a weird thing to say, but I know some of you have been there. You get to this point where, I don't know, I started to think that like this whole reality was just something inside of God's imagination. Like God has hyperphantasia, and this is just an extremely vivid mental projection of God's mind. And yeah, I started getting into these little, you know, thought pathways of simulation theory and, you know, what reality really is. I mean, this is kind of my thing. I love contemplating the nature of reality, and especially during trips. And it really gives you this like higher perspective to contemplate it from. I start contemplating about, you know, what actually are dimensions? What are mental dimensions? What is space in the mind? What is images in the mind? When I visualize something in my mind, when I have this extremely vivid mental imagery, like where does it exist? You know, and it's not even necessarily trying to find the answers to these questions. The important thing is having the questions, is just thinking about it and contemplating all of these things. So I was in some intense contemplation during this trip, and I was kind of experiencing a lot of the similar themes that I've gone through time after time. Anyway, But yeah, you know, sometimes it very much does seem like you tap into this like greater mind, and that greater mind is the thing that's creating reality. And I know I've said this time after time, but you know, at least I'm consistent. At least I'm consistent with a lot of my thoughts. I did get into some other things, but I want to go back a little bit because this was a main theme of my trip. So leading up to this experience, I had been listening to this song on repeat like a crazy person, okay? The song is The Air That I Breathe by the Hollies, and I think it's the most beautiful, divine, sacred song in existence at this point. Really, I do. But I had been listening to it on repeat like dozens of times a day, like past the point of to where I usually do that. Like I typically sometimes get kind of repetitive with my behavior, but usually not to this extent. Like the dopamine was still dopamining, and I couldn't believe it, but I trusted it. I trusted it. So leading up to this trip, I had been listening to that song over and over and over again. And when it came time for this trip, like I said, I'm out in my living room, silence, darkness. The song's playing in my head like perfectly. And I think I'm gonna have to tell you the lyrics because they're important. Okay, so just stay with me for a second. I have to catch my breath. Okay. It says, if I could make a wish, I think I'd pass. Can't think of anything I need. No cigarettes, no sleep, no light, no sound, nothing to eat, no books to read. Making love with you has left me peaceful inside. What more could I ask? There's nothing left to be desired. I think that's the main lyric that really stuck. There's nothing left to be desired. So I was kind of having this sort of Buddhist experience, listening to this song in my head. Okay, so there's no actual sounds going on, but I hear this song perfectly, and I'm just sitting in a chair in my living room. And I don't even know what to tell you because for a second I was really there, you know? Right? I don't know, but I was thinking a lot about desire and desire. You seem to go through, I can kind of go through these weird like paradoxes in my mind. I try to think about like, you know, what I desire, and then do I really desire that? And then, you know, maybe you're really just longing for that state of desirelessness, and that's what the song is, you know, making love with you has left me peaceful. What more could I ask? There's nothing left to be desired. There was something about that was so beautiful. Like that's what I wanted to capture. I wanted to capture that feeling, that peace, that total peace of there being nothing else to desire. And you know, I've been through these paths like a lot of times, so it's not like these are new thoughts to me, but it was a beautiful experience of just breathing, meditating. It was almost like the song took on this meaning of like making love with you, making love with this universe, this process of the universe, this life process, this, I don't know, the entire cosmos, like making love with this. Like when you truly make love with it, you are left peaceful. I don't know, this reminds me of another theme of my trip, and that is, again, re-emphasizing the message that the meaning of life is the spiritual quest. That is, the meaning of life is to discover the meaning of life. And it seems like everything else beyond the spiritual quest is just some sort of fix and fixation. Like the only thing beyond that is the spiritual path. So, you know, I kind of found this new spiritual realignment, and yeah, there's only so many times, I should say this, there's only so many times that you can experience some sort of spiritual awakening. You know, it's really important to have good spiritual practices. So this is kind of something that I wanted to do as a takeaway from this trip. I just really want to be disciplined in some of my spiritual practices because because it's a worthwhile thing to do. Anyway, I might be losing it. You know, I have a quote that I wanted to share with you about LSD. This is an Aldous Huxley quote, and he described LSD as a gratuitous grace, neither necessary nor sufficient for salvation. And I really liked that. I read it during my LSD trip. It was on the back cover of the book LSD, My Problem Child by Albert Hoffman. And it really stuck with me. You know, like, this is what psychedelics are. They're kind of a, you know, I can't believe we even have this grace, that we've even been given this gift, you know, but it's not necessary for salvation. You do not need psychedelics for any of these things. It's also not sufficient. Psychedelics alone will not get you there. So I found that to be an important message. Let me go back to my notes, because there is some more things. Time. I do want to bring up time a little bit. So I had mentioned those hyperfixations that I had. I Love Lucy, the song, The Air That I Breathe. It was weird. I have hyperfixations a lot, and sometimes I trust it. But then those became the main themes of this trip, and it was almost in a way like it was meant to be that way. Like, the reason I had been listening to that song over and over and over is because the trip where that song was an important piece of the experience, like, that had already happened. And so I needed to retroactively, I don't know if this makes any sense. I feel I might be losing you. But sometimes it feels like it all came together in the way that it exactly had to. And I feel this a lot. Sometimes I feel like I can sense when a trip is coming. Like, if I look back into the days before a trip, even if I hadn't been planning the trip, even if it was at least relatively spontaneous, I sometimes get this feeling that, like, I knew the trip was coming on some level, some higher dimensional version of myself that's existing outside of time. I already knew that this trip was happening at the time it was happening. And that, you know, it left like breadcrumbs in the days leading up to it. I don't know if any of you have experienced that, but yeah, I started thinking a lot about dimensions, mind, space. What is time? That's something I think about a lot. I've really wanted to do a whole psychedelic analysis of time. What do you think time is? What is time? I don't know. You get to this. It's so hard because your mind wants to perceive time linearly. But time and time again, I seem to get to the point where the linear perception of time is just an illusion. I don't know. It's so hard to think about. Like, it strains my brain trying to think about time. So I think that's why sometimes it's easier to contemplate the nature of time in these higher states of consciousness, because in the sober state, that pull back into that linear flow is so strong. But with psychedelics, you don't have that as strong of a pull. So it's easier to kind of really contemplate, what is time in the first place? I don't know. I think it's some sort of dimension. Like, it all exists. It all exists at once, and everything affects everything else. Like, simultaneously, everything affects everything else. Okay. So yeah, that was basically the entire trip. I might still say a few more things, but yeah, I did a lot of dancing, stretching, moving, contemplating, meditating. I do have to say one thing. Speaking of the song, The Air That I Breathe, fun fact, there was like a whole copyright dispute with that song and the song Creep by Radiohead, which I'm sure most of you know that song. And I like that song too. And so I don't know, to me, The Air That I Breathe is kind of like this divine, perfect essence of a song. And then Creep is kind of the wonky version. You know, maybe I'm my own creep. I don't know. Don't listen to that. Sometimes I just say things and I forget that, you know, you're not in my head. Okay. So I do want to say a few more things. So I had made a video on telepathy a few days ago, which is actually weird because I just saw a few days ago that Vivek posted a video about telepathy, and I had already made it and uploaded it, but now I don't know. maybe I'll still put up the video. I wasn't completely satisfied with it. But I have been thinking about telepathy a lot lately, and I really want to do some experiments with telepathy and psychedelics, because particularly with LSD, I typically always experience telepathy at high enough doses. Now, this time I didn't really have anything to experiment with other than my cat. I was kind of having a telepathic experience with my cat, but that's not really the same thing as like with another human being. Well, it's similar, but yeah, I'd also been listening to the Telepathy Tapes. I don't know. It's interesting. I don't know if any of you have heard of it. I got suggested it, recommended by somebody, and yeah, there's lots of things to think about, isn't there? You know, you should stay curious. You really should stay curious. You know, that's kind of part of my spiritual quest, is curiosity. Like, it's fueled by that desire to, here we go again, I said the word desire. I don't know, desire is a weird thing to think about. I was thinking about it quite a bit. Desire. Who knows? Who knows, really? Anyway, I do hope that you could have got something. I do hope that you got something out of this trip report, and, you know, I just really wanted to share it with you. I get these, I'm in these trips sometimes, and I feel very isolated in my own mind, and being able to share these experiences is really meaningful to me. I don't feel so lost and trapped in my own mind. You know, I can have these trips, and, you know, especially sometimes when I get into these higher states of consciousness, it's like, it's so beautiful, it's everything, but in that moment, the only thing I want is to share it with somebody. So here we go, I shared it with you the best I can, and that's gonna be all for today's video. You will see me in the next one. Bye-bye.